Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today, all the way from snowy Vermont, and I can say that because it's snowing here in Nashville, Tennessee today. Connor Frost is joining us. Connor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
So you're one of those cats that checked us out on Spotify looking for music content type shows and came across us, and you sent us your bio and your information, and we thought, this might be a good fit to have you on the show because it's something a little different. I like what you want to talk about, which is why they struggle to write and release their first album. But before we go there, let's back up and let's talk a little bit about you, because I understand you come from a musical family. Your mom and dad were both musicians?
That's correct, and they still are. Yeah, my dad originally voice, kind of a jack of all trades. He was also a band teacher and choral teacher for many years. In recent years, really focusing on composing and arranging. And my mom is a concert pianist, came here to the United States from Taiwan when she was 15 to pursue her piano, and went on to do really cool things. And so, yeah, it's in my blood, so to speak.
How did you get started? Was this something you picked up from your parents? Did you just pick up an instrument? What was your first instrument?
So my first instrument, unsurprisingly, was piano. Having my mom in the house, she was my first piano teacher. And so, yeah, I don't know that I had a choice in the matter per se. I think I was just shy of 5 years old when I started learning piano. Eventually shifted to trumpet when I was in third grade as my second instrument. My dad had a con trumpet laying in the attic, and my dad was a brass guy from when he was a kid. And fell in love with writing songs in middle school and high school, and that has been kind of my focus ever since. But yeah, piano when I was about 5 was the start of it all.
It's very ironic. You and I have literally gone down the exact same path. I may have started piano a year or two later than you, but yeah, I picked up trumpet, and my first trumpet was a con trumpet in elementary school, and played that through high school. So yeah. In addition to being a musician and being a singer-songwriter and having been in several groups when I read your bio, including, correct me if I'm wrong, a punk pop group, if I said that correctly. You are also mentoring to help songwriters, or maybe I should say, you're also helping people who struggle to write and release their first album, because that can be a daunting task in itself, especially in this climate we're in today, which you don't need a record deal to do that, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you summarized it very, very well. So in terms of my mentoring, I help songwriters to write and release their first album or single so they can effectively start their artist journey. So I'm really all about the genesis of their career, so to speak, because, I think that for a lot of people can be the hardest part, is just kind of analyzing the overwhelm, breaking it down so you can take that first step to getting started. So that's what I specialize in getting people started.
What was your incentive to go in that direction in the first place? Was this a self journey for you that, is this where you realize that, if I can do this, anybody can do this? What motivated you to go down this path?
That's definitely part of it. When I reflect on my own music career, it's absent of any sort of fame or fortune, but I've had the good fortune and the great opportunities to be able to tour internationally, self-release music, co-produce music videos, be featured on radio, podcasts, things of that nature. And so I think to be able to like encourage those who feel like maybe it's not possible to live a really musical life, to show them that with the right steps, with the right mindset, you absolutely can. And despite, not making millions from my music, I really feel blessed. And so I think that was the main inspiration in showing people that they can do it with the right steps.
When you say you're not making millions, but you're still, is this a self-sustaining career for you, the way you're doing it?
It is now. It wasn't until fairly recently. I had various side hustles throughout the years, from tutoring and teaching part-time, performing and gigging here and there. So I sort of did that for many years. And then, in recent years, or in the last couple of years, really being able to package this business and make it what I do along with my own music. And it's been really special in the last couple of years. When we talk about the struggles that a lot of creative people go through to get started, what did you find to be your biggest hurdle for yourself when you got started? For sure. In the beginning, I think it was largely comparing myself to others. I think I was fairly confident in my abilities as a musician, but there were just certain things where I felt like there were gaps in my knowledge and I was insecure about it. I remember it very vividly. It was almost 10 years we're in 2022. So 2022. So it was 10 years ago. In fact, that I sort of made the decision of, I am going to be a student of music for the rest of my life. And so when I kind of locked into that mindset and made that decision, everything changed for me. Everything became a lot more fun. And instead of comparing myself to others in a way that was, hurting me, I did it in a way, in a place of inspiration. And so, I would say that moment was absolutely huge for me. When you sit down and start comparing yourself to someone else, and we can do that in the podcast business all day long and say, hey, we want to be the next Joe Rogan or the Howard Stern or whoever it is. But can that be a bit detrimental when it comes to creating who you are as an individual? And when you try and compare yourself with someone else, you really need to effectively figure out who you are. Absolutely. And I think there's a way you can go about it analytically, right? So like if you really like a particular artist, particular podcast or whatever it may be, I think it's actually good to research and to analyze what they're doing. But I think it needs to come from a place of you being a student, right? If you immediately default to, oh, they're doing it so much better than me. Oh, they're so much further ahead than me. I think that's where it starts to get debilitating. So it ultimately, I've realized in my own journey, as well as, now helping my various clients, I think it largely comes down to mindset for sure. Do you think because we see so much in The Voice and American Idol and America's Got Talent and these other shows, it's almost this instant gratification type of thing? Do you feel like a lot of creative people who want to get out there and release their debut project, do you find them putting the cart before the horse, so to speak? Do they get frustrated because it doesn't happen overnight like they seem to think it does with these shows? Absolutely. And I think, honestly, it's gotten worse with the age of social media, just because these vanity metrics are so visible, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever else. But I absolutely agree. And to answer your question, yes, I find that a lot of people are putting the cart before the horse. I'll get people on these initial discovery calls, and they're asking about, how to work the Spotify algorithm and how to, get maximum plays on YouTube. A, I'm not exactly an expert in that, so they're probably coming to the wrong place. B, a lot of times they haven't even written a full song yet. They're thinking so far ahead as to like where they want to go that they're not focusing on what's in front of them. So that's definitely a big part of what I do, is basically saying, okay, this is where you're at. This is what you need to focus on, and breaking that down into consumable chunks so that it makes sense for them going forward.
So where does someone actually start when they come to you? What do they need to get the ball rolling?
So it really it depends on the person, on the musician, but it's anywhere from having a song idea, but not being able to put together a full song, all the way to I have a bunch of songs, but I can't seem to take them to the next step to actually get them out into the world. So that's sort of like the spectrum where people are in terms of who come to me. So, it's anywhere between like, more like songwriting lessons, I suppose, like teaching song form, how to construct a melody, teaching about chord progressions, or on the other side of it, just like, okay, you have a bunch of songs, but like, let's figure out a strategy where you can get them into a released form in a way that you feel comfortable with and you're excited about. So that's kind of like the spectrum. So I guess like the common denominator is that everyone is looking for a start, whether it's writing their first song or releasing their first single. Everyone's looking for a start when they come to me.
And that first song or that first single, you mentioned something where they may come to you and they have bits and pieces, but they don't have a complete song. Is that where co-writing comes into effect, or do you have them go back and do some wood shedding on their own to try and figure out how to take those pieces of the puzzle and put it together? What's the recipe for that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Generally, I think as a coach, it's my job to not necessarily give the answers, but empower the client to find out the answers themselves, right? So naturally, there's a bit of like co-writing that happens just in terms of me giving suggestions, but generally it's like, okay, let's talk about this idea. Let's figure out what you like. Let's figure out what you don't like. And let's figure out what the next step would be, right? And so a lot of times it's coming to terms with the fact that like they actually do have an idea there that's good. They just need to keep rolling with it as opposed to abandoning it to, I'm actually really stuck and really getting more into, okay, how can we get you unstuck? So generally, I like to first empower them to go back and figure out how they can get past a certain point to go from idea to a song. But certainly there is some co-writing and some collaboration that comes into play.
So the songs are done. They've actually spent some time creating some good music. They've gone into the studio and they've recorded them. Now what?
Yeah. So the next part is crafting, what I like to call a release plan, right? A self-release plan. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of that can be a little bit daunting. And so what I like to do is present different types of release plans that can happen, right? And so one is simply getting your music, up on SoundCloud or Bandcamp or whatever it is, and sharing it to the world for the first time, which I think is cool, versus going through a little bit more comprehensive of a release plan in terms of, planning your content, whether it's social media or anything else, maybe pitching it to some blogs, some music publications. So there are different levels in terms of what a release plan is, but I like to break it down so people can kind of choose their path, and I can help them through that as well.
Releasing a single versus releasing a complete project, because you just mentioned there's all these different platforms you can put music on. What is the best thing? Is it just releasing a song or two? And if that's the case, what are the best platforms to do that on?
Yeah, I don't consider myself to necessarily be an expert when it comes to platform navigation and understanding, the algorithms and everything else.
Is anybody an expert at this point on that? Because that's a dynamic that's changing constantly.
Fair enough. No, you're absolutely right. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. So single versus album. I think I differ from the gurus on this a little bit. So I think a lot of gurus will tell you that it is a singles world, right? People are losing their attention span. Like you need to put out music more regularly, but in smaller chunks. I don't necessarily have a problem with that thinking, but I think for me, ultimately, you have to put out music in the way that feels most authentic to you, right? So if you feel really stoked about putting out an album and that's what makes most sense in terms of your creative expression, I don't think you should necessarily not do that just because it's no longer industry standard or whatever it might be, right? So that's, I guess, a little bit of my hot take. That being said, I do think that especially when you're getting started, the idea of releasing an album can feel overwhelming. So if releasing a song at first is a good way to just kind of get yourself out there and get over the hump, then I definitely think it's in your best interest to do that. In terms of the platforms, again, at least here in the United States, I feel like it's Spotify and Apple Music. Again, like you said, things are changing every day, but I would say if you're trying to get as many people to hear your music as possible, if that's the goal, then yeah, I would probably say, certainly Spotify and Apple Music are the two places.
On the show with us today, all the way from snowy Vermont, Connor Frost is with us.
Hi, this is Chuck Thompson with the Thompson Entertainment Group. Check out my episode on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right, everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, Connor Frost. We're talking about how to get started. The mind-boggling world, the mind-boggling aspect of putting a project out there for the world to see. And I think part of it has to do with there's a certain sense of security, or maybe lack of insecurity, when someone creates a project. Is this going to be good enough to get out there? Is this something that people are going to want to hear? Is that something you help them overcome? That, because that in itself can be an obstacle.
I would say that's probably a large part of what I do. It's a lot of mindset work and getting them to a place of perspective, of locking in the right mindset so that they can redefine their version of success and they can understand their journey in terms of where they are and where they're going so that they can take that first step. So to answer your question, yes, that's absolutely a large part of what I do, even on like a session to session basis with the clients that I work with.
When someone's putting a series of songs together, whether it's just going to be a grouping of singles or it's going to be an entire project, and their format changes, so maybe one song is kind of ska, another one's pop, another one's got a little Americana flavor or country flavor to it. Does that need to be fine-tuned and tweaked a little bit so there's some more consistency, or is it okay to be kind of that smorgasbord of music out there?
I think it really depends on where they are in their journey. If they're really just starting out with songwriting, then I would say writing what comes to you naturally in the moments, I think is most important, because you really are just starting out and you're trying to find your voice, right? If you have a more involved project where you're really trying to create a collection of songs that's cohesive, then yeah, I would say probably some fine tuning would be needed, probably having a metal song and a classical acoustic pop song all in one record might be a little bit strange. And definitely if that were the case, I would voice that. So yeah, I think it really depends on the journey. I think if you're just starting out, I think it's really good to get the ideas out and form those complete songs and kind of see what happens from there.
And when you mention that, I mean, groups like Led Zeppelin were able to accomplish that 40 some odd years ago. But it's a different world now. And when you talk about success, because I want to go down that path just a little bit in defining what is success. You know, success for some people is selling a couple million records and having a private jet. Another level of success would just be being on the road and touring and performing. Do you have those conversations with, maybe I should say, this is a reality check for you. You need to not worry about the private jet and maybe focus on that 12-passenger van pulling a trailer?
All the time. I have those conversations all the time. I think that it's funny, though, because I think sometimes people are like, okay, I want to be a full-time musician. And then there are other goals that they have related to streams and plays. And sometimes those things don't totally mesh. Right. And so to have the conversations of like, okay, what does being a full-time musician mean to you, and breaking that down. So absolutely, there is an element of, okay, let's reel it back in. Regardless of what your dreams are, regardless of where you want to go, you can't get there unless you start and unless you focus on what's in front of you. And so it's my job to provide that perspective so that they can focus on what's in front of them and take that really important first step for sure.
Now, let's move forward a little bit. And, you know, the first album release is done. How do you turn that into success? Or maybe what we should say is, how do you turn that into music business opportunities? What do they need to look for at that point?
Absolutely. I think it's, again, it comes down to the client, it comes down to the person. You know, some people, like you said, are interested in performing. Some people are interested in professional songwriting, whatever it may be. And so at that point, it's my job to really provide clear paths in terms of what they can do next, right? So if they voice that they're interested in pursuing songwriting, right? Professional songwriting, or getting placements and licensing, whatever it might be, right? It's my job to make sure that they have a clear next step to doing what that is, right? And that may or may not involve me, doesn't really matter, but to be able to provide them with a rough roadmap and as well as what they need to do next, you know, I feel like is my job.
The artist that wants to get out there and perform, and we talk about this quite a bit on the show, especially with COVID and kind of that whole up and down. It's just a big roller coaster we're all on these days. Hey, let's go out on the road and tour. Oh, we can't do that. Well, let's go out and play some spot dates. Well, no, we can go back on and tour again. And that can be a little mind-numbing and confusing. But is there a place for that artist that once they've finished the project where they can start and do something like that?
Yeah. Again, I think it comes down to the artist's goals, their visions, and their interests. I think like the point that I try to get across is that when it comes to being a full-time musician, quote unquote, to be open to other ways to monetize your fan base that go beyond just them listening to your songs and going to your shows. Right. So if you can create some sort of experience, a fan experience that people can buy into that is perhaps different from those more traditional paths, you might find that goal of becoming a full-time musician, quote unquote, quicker than you wouldn't potentially. And so that's sort of the perspective that I like to give is like, be open to the many different opportunities that the music industry can offer if you're able to like figure out what those steps are and get to where you're going.
When you talk about that fan experience, can you define that a little more for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm a good example. Creating this songwriting mentoring program, a lot of my first few clients were fans of my band. And so, you know, when people buy into your music, they're actually buying into you. And so to be able to have a product and an experience that they can buy into that, again, goes beyond the shows, goes beyond the streams, plays, I think you could see really interesting results and really cool relationships come from that. So I guess to use myself as an example is kind of what I'm talking about.
Do you find that it's difficult sometimes or maybe not to explain to the artist, to the creative person, that they are the product, the music is just an extension of them? I mean, unless you look at it differently than I do, but that's really how I see it is when you get out there, you're not promoting the album or you're not promoting the song. You're promoting yourself. That music is just as a marketing piece of yourself.
I completely agree. And to answer your question, I don't think it's hard for me to explain. It can be challenging for people to understand and fully grasp. But it's a work in progress, and those reminders come up over the course of working with me, certainly. But I completely agree with you. And I think when you've broken it down as much as I have with people, I hope, that it's gotten a little bit easier to explain it each time, for sure.
Time management, that's a big part of it.
Time management is huge. And even like changing your perspective on the importance of time, right? Because like I'm a firm believer that if you have a focused 1 hour where you go into a writing session and you know exactly what needs to get done, that actually might go a lot further than having 6 hours, but not really having any sort of direction. So time management, absolutely. Goal setting is certainly something that plays into that as well.
Let's talk about goal setting. What type of goals should that creative person, once they finish the project, or maybe leading up to getting that project done, what are some of those goals that they should set? 2 or 3 of them, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that a good goal is one that you can achieve in 3 to 4 months' time, is something that is measurable, right? Something that you can you have that tangible result that comes from that goal. And then the third piece is something that you don't necessarily have to rely on another individual or another group of people, whatever it is, to achieve that goal, right? So a lot of times when it comes down to being creative as a songwriter, I think putting a number of songs that you hope to complete by the end of a month, by the end of 2 months, I think is like a good goal, because that's measurable and it's absolutely attainable.
Should you have people be listening to your music as you're putting it together, or wait till it's completed? And how do you get an honest, objective, critique of that music as you're putting it out there? Is that something you should be doing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to be honest, I kind of go back and forth on that. But I think ultimately, if you're surrounding yourself with the right people who are supporting you, I don't see an issue with sharing your music with them along the way, right? I think where it gets a little bit fuzzy is not being totally clear if that person is supportive or not. And that's where it gets like a little bit messy.
If it's like Aunt Norma, or Uncle Joe, that's doing your critiquing, or Grandma, let's face it, they're probably not going to be fair, honest, or objective in the matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think hiring, not trying to, talk up my services, but like literally hiring a coach, I think is one way to get that objective feedback. I think, if you have some sort of co-writing partner, that can be helpful, even just for accountability, right? Not necessarily writing together, but someone who's also going through a similar journey. I think that's a good way where you go into the agreement of like, okay, we're doing this together. We're going to provide each other honest feedback and to help each other out. I think that could be another way. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it can be a little bit tricky when it comes to the people in your circle who are supportive or not supportive, and navigating through those waters.
So how would someone such as yourself, in addition to hiring a coach, find those people that are going down the same path as you? Because let's face it, and I'm not picking on any particular town, but let's say you're in Dothan, Alabama, or Duluth, Minnesota, and nobody seems to have quite the incentive and drive for you to, that same drive that you want, that you're trying to achieve, that you're trying to accomplish. How do you go about finding someone? Is that something you can do long distance and keep that type of motivation, that relationship alive?
Yeah, I think it is, especially in the world that we've been living in the last 2 years, having to resort to the internet to keep some level of connection and creativity. So yeah, I think absolutely it can be done long distance, just with how easy it is to send ideas to each other through email and whatever else. To answer your question on where to find those people, I think social media, for its many downfalls, it can actually be a great way for people to connect with each other. And I think Facebook groups that are specific to songwriting perhaps are definitely like a good place. I think the Instagram community of songwriters is actually a really awesome place where I found a lot of cool people. So I think, it might involve stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit and making some connections with strangers, and that might feel funny, but you never know who you might meet through the internet to help you get to where you want to go.
In the studio with us today, Connor Frost.
Hi, this is Amira Alvarez, founder and CEO of The Unstoppable Woman. Join us as we have a look beyond the mics and the lights here on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilog, the Kronos, Wave State, Op 6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Are you curious about Gordon Lightfoot's songwriting process or what it was like working with Prince in the 80s? Have you ever given any thought to what goes into a golf course design or writing a book? I'm Steve Waxman, the host of The Creationist, a podcast about people who create. Each episode features a different creator sharing stories that I hope will inspire your own creativity. The Creationist is available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, Connor Frost is with us all the way from Vermont. We're talking about, creating that first step, getting out there and turning this piece of magical music that's in your head and turning it into a physical embodiment, whether it be digital or it be a physical piece of music. How do people go about finding you, and at what point in their career should they start thinking about approaching you?
Yeah. So in terms of how they find me, I think it's just through all the different avenues related to the internet, word of mouth. I think social media. I'm fairly active on Instagram, so that's definitely like a place where people find me. Podcasts, certainly, and also word of mouth, just clients that I've worked with, telling their friends, etc. So yeah, I think that's definitely been huge for me in terms of building my business.
So at what point in their career path where they're starting, how far along are you looking to help develop and work with them?
Right, absolutely. So it's a bit of a spectrum, but I would say if you are looking to either complete your first collection of songs, write your first collection of songs, and or release your first collection of songs, then I'm definitely a person to come to, because it's all about learning those tools, whether they're related to songwriting, whether they're related to just getting your music out there for the first time, learning those tools. And so if you identify under any of those sort of, perfectionist musicians, perfectionist songwriters, beginner songwriters, not really knowing where to go, not knowing where to start, then definitely someone I can help.
The business side of music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The business side of music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.